I still remember the exact moment I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my career. It was a Tuesday morning. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener. My boss, Richard Chin, stood at the head of the table with that politician's smile he always wore when he was about to destroy someone's life. And I had no idea it was about to be mine. "Emma," he said, his voice warm like we were old friends. "I want to thank you for everything you've done for this company." Past tense. He used past tense. My stomach dropped. "For the past 18 months, you've been instrumental in developing our new client acquisition strategy. You've mentored our team. You've sacrificed weekends, holidays, even your personal relationships to make this company what it is today." I glanced around the room. 12 faces stared back at me. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked excited. Like they knew something I didn't. Then I saw him. Marcus Webb. Sitting 2 seats down from Richard, wearing a suit I'd never seen before. Expensive. New. His eyes met mine for just a second before he looked away. My protégé. My golden boy. The junior analyst I'd personally trained, mentored, and vouched for when everyone else said he wasn't ready. "Which is why," Richard continued, "it gives me great pleasure to announce that Marcus Webb will be taking over as Senior Director of Client Strategy." The room erupted in applause. My position. He was taking my position. Marcus stood up, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. He still wouldn't look at me. Richard kept talking, something about restructuring in new directions and exciting opportunities, but his words sounded like they were coming from underwater. My ears were ringing. My hands were shaking under the table where no one could see. I'd taught Marcus everything. Every strategy. Every client secret. Every shortcut I'd learned in 10 years of clawing my way up in this industry. I'd shared my personal network with him. I'd let him sit in on my most important meetings. I'd edited his presentations at midnight. I'd covered for him when he screwed up. And now he was taking my job. "Emma will be transitioning to a consulting role," Richard said, and I heard it for what it was. A demotion. A humiliation. A way to push me out without paying severance. Everyone was still clapping. Still smiling. Still celebrating the man I'd built from nothing. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, loud enough that everyone stopped and looked at me. "Emma?" Richard said. "Did you want to say a few words?" I looked at Marcus. Really looked at him. He'd finally met my eyes, and you know what I saw there? Nothing. No guilt. No gratitude. No shame. Just cold calculation. That's when I knew. This wasn't a surprise to him. This wasn't some sudden decision Richard had made. Marcus had known. Maybe for weeks. Maybe for months. And he'd said nothing. "No," I said quietly. "I have nothing to say." I walked out of that conference room with my head high and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I didn't go back to my office. I didn't collect my things. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I walked straight through the lobby, past the security desk, through the revolving doors, and out into the cold March morning. And I kept walking. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. Because what I did in the weeks that followed? It changed everything. The first 3 days after I walked out, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't shower. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't eat anything except whatever I could have delivered to my door. I sat on my couch in the same pajamas, staring at the wall, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Marcus. How had I missed it? The signs were all there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Like 6 months ago, when I'd introduced Marcus to David Thornton, the CEO of Meridian Industries, our biggest potential client. I'd spent 3 years building a relationship with David. 3 years of lunch meetings and golf outings and carefully crafted proposals. And I'd brought Marcus along to that final pitch meeting because I wanted him to learn how to close a major deal. Marcus had been quiet during most of the presentation. Taking notes. Observing. Exactly what I'd told him to do. But at the end, when David asked who would be his main point of contact, Marcus had smiled and said, "That would be me, sir. Emma's taught me everything she knows." I'd laughed it off. Thought it was cute. Thought he was being eager. David had looked at me, then at Marcus, and said, "Good. I like working with hungry young talent." I should have seen it then. The way Marcus's smile had widened. The way he'd immediately started steering the conversation away from me. 2 weeks later, David signed with us. Our biggest contract in company history. $12.5 million over 3 years. And Richard had called it Marcus's win. I'd corrected him, of course. Reminded him that I'd spent 3 years cultivating that relationship. That I'd designed the entire proposal strategy. That Marcus had only been involved for the final month. Richard had nodded and said, "Of course, Emma. Of course. But you have to admit, Marcus really brought it home." I'd let it go. Because I was a team player. Because I thought there would be other wins. Because I was stupid enough to believe that hard work and loyalty meant something. On the 4th day, my best friend Zoe showed up at my apartment with Thai food and a bottle of wine. "Open the door, Emma," she shouted through the hallway. "I know you're in there. Mrs. Chen from 3B saw you sign for a pizza delivery yesterday." I opened the door. Zoe took one look at me and winced. "Oh honey," she said, pushing past me with bags of food. "You look like death." "Thanks," I muttered, closing the door. "I'm serious. When's the last time you washed your hair?" She was already unpacking containers of pad thai and spring rolls onto my coffee table. Or changed clothes. Or opened a window. "It smells like depression in here." 4 days ago, I lost everything I'd worked for, I said, sinking back onto the couch. "Excuse me if I'm not at my best." Zoe sat down next to me and grabbed my hand. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the meeting. About Marcus. About Richard's fake smile and the past tense thank you and the way everyone had clapped like I should be happy about my own execution. "And the worst part?" I said, my voice cracking. "The absolute worst part is that I did this to myself." I handed him everything he needed to replace me. I was so focused on being a good mentor, on lifting others up, that I didn't see I was digging my own grave. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you remember when we were in grad school and Professor Morrison said that the business world rewards sharks, not saints?" "Yeah. You didn't believe him. You said there had to be a way to succeed with integrity. To help others and still win." "I was wrong," I said bitterly. "No." Zoe squeezed my hand. "You weren't wrong. Marcus was just a better shark than you expected. But here's the thing about sharks, Emma. They're predictable. They always go for blood. And once you know that..." She smiled. "You can plan accordingly." I looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're one of the smartest strategists I've ever met. You built campaigns that doubled client retention rates. You developed acquisition models that every competitor tried to copy. You did all of that while playing nice and following the rules." She leaned closer. "Imagine what you could do if you stopped playing nice." Something shifted in my chest. A small, dark seed of an idea. "I can't go back there," I said. "I can't work for Richard again. I can't watch Marcus sit in my office and take credit for my work." "Then don't," Zoe said simply. "Go somewhere better. Do something better. Or. She paused dramatically. Start something better. Start what? Your own firm. Zoe's eyes were bright with excitement now. Emma, you have the skills. You have the reputation. You have connections with half the major clients in the industry. Why work for someone else when you could work for yourself? I shook my head. That takes capital. Resources. Time. I can't just, you have severance, right? Technically, I haven't resigned yet. I just left. Perfect. Go back tomorrow. Negotiate your exit. Get everything you're entitled to. Then use that money to start your own consultancy. Zoe was fully animated now, pacing my living room. Think about it. No more Richard taking credit for your ideas. No more Marcus backstabbing you. No more playing by someone else's rules. Just you, your talent, and clients who actually appreciate what you bring to the table. I let the idea sink in. My own firm. My own rules. My own success. It's risky, I said quietly. So is trusting people like Richard and Marcus, Zoe countered. At least this way, if you fail, it's on your own terms. That night, after Zoe left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in 4 days, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I could build. The next morning, I showered. Did my hair. Put on my best power suit, the navy one with the perfect cut that made me feel like I could negotiate anything. I walked back into that office building with my head high. The receptionist's eyes went wide when she saw me. Emma. We thought is Richard in? I interrupted. Yes, but, thanks. I walked past her desk, past the rows of cubicles where people suddenly got very interested in their computer screens, straight to Richard's corner office. I didn't knock. I opened his door and walked in. Richard looked up from his laptop, startled. Emma. I didn't expect, we need to talk about my exit package, I said, closing the door behind me. He recovered quickly, settling back into his chair with that insufferable smile. Of course. Please, sit. I didn't sit. I placed a folder on his desk. Inside was a printed document I'd spent 3 hours preparing that morning. What's this? Richard asked, not touching it. A summary of every major client relationship I've developed in the past 5 years. Every strategy I've created. Every proprietary process I've documented. I kept my voice steady and professional. Along with a detailed breakdown of my contributions to the company's revenue growth. Richard's smile faded slightly. Emma, I'm not sure what you're trying to. I'm trying to establish my value before we discuss compensation, I said calmly. Because I know how this works, Richard. You'll offer me 2 months severance and call it generous. You'll tell me it's standard procedure. You'll make it sound like you're doing me a favor. We've always treated you fairly, Richard said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. Really? Is it fair to promote someone into my position without even telling me I was being replaced? Is it fair to let me train my own replacement without knowing that's what I was doing? I leaned forward, placing my hands on his desk. Is it fair to take credit for my work while pushing me into a consulting role that we both know is just a polite way of firing me? Richard's jaw tightened. You walked out of a company meeting without explanation. You abandoned your responsibilities. What did you expect? I expect 6 months severance, I said. Full benefits continuation for a year. And a letter of recommendation that accurately reflects my contributions to this company. That's ridiculous. I can't, you can. And you will. I straightened up. Because if you don't, I'll make sure every major client knows exactly who developed the strategies that won their business. I'll make sure they know that Marcus Webb is a junior analyst with 18 months of experience who couldn't close a deal without a script I wrote. Richard stood up now, his face flushing. Are you threatening me? I'm negotiating, I said calmly. Something I learned to do very well in the 10 years I've worked here. While you were taking credit for my work. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't bluffing. Finally, Richard sat back down. 4 months severance. 6 months of benefits. And I'll write your letter myself. 6 months severance. 1 year of benefits. And the letter gets reviewed by my attorney before I sign anything. Emma, those are my terms, Richard. Take them or spend the next year explaining to the board why your senior director of client strategy walked out and took half your client relationships with her. Another long silence. Then Richard picked up his phone. Jessica, can you draft a separation agreement for Emma Reese? 6 months salary, full benefits for 12 months, and I'll need to write a letter of recommendation. Have it ready by end of day? He hung up and looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Respect. And maybe a little fear. Anything else? He asked. Yes, I said. I want access to my office for 1 hour to collect my personal files. No supervision. No Marcus hovering around trying to see what I'm taking. Fine. Jessica will arrange it. Good. I picked up my folder from his desk. It's been educational, Richard. I hope Marcus works out for you. I turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped me at the door. Emma. I looked back. You were always too soft for this industry, he said. You cared too much about people. That's why Marcus was a better fit for the role. I smiled then. A real smile. You know what, Richard? You're absolutely right. I was too soft. But I'm not anymore. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. An hour later, I was in my old office, boxing up files and personal items. Photos of my team at company events. The Crystal Award I'd won for exceeding quarterly targets 3 years in a row. My notebooks full of client insights and strategy sketches. And my external hard drive. The one where I'd backed up everything. Every presentation. Every client profile. Every process document. Every lesson I'd learned. I heard footsteps and looked up. Marcus stood in the doorway, that expensive suit somehow looking less impressive in the harsh office lighting. Hey, he said awkwardly. Marcus. I kept packing, didn't look at him. I wanted to. I mean, I should. He trailed off, unable to finish whatever sentence he'd planned. Should what? I asked, finally meeting his eyes. Apologize? Thank me? Explain why you didn't have the decency to give me a heads up before you took my job. It wasn't like that, he said, stepping into the office. Richard approached me. He said the company was going in a new direction. He said they needed someone who could. Who could what? Do my job for half the salary? Say yes to everything without pushing back? Be the loyal puppet you've proven yourself to be? Marcus's expression hardened. This is business, Emma. Not personal. I actually laughed at that. You know, I've heard that line in a dozen movies, and it never stops being bullshit. Business is always personal, Marcus. Every deal, every relationship, every betrayal. It's all personal. I learned a lot from you, he said quietly. I'm grateful for that. Are you? I zipped up my bag and grabbed my box of files. Because grateful people usually don't stab their mentors in the back. I didn't. Yes, you did. I walked toward him, and he had to step aside to let me pass. But that's okay. Because you taught me something too, Marcus. You taught me that the people you help the most are sometimes the ones who'll hurt you the worst. That's a valuable lesson. So thank you. I walked past him, down the hallway, and out of that office for the last time. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Emma, wait," but I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease on a small office space in the Riverside district. It wasn't much. Just 2 rooms, exposed brick, and windows that overlooked a coffee shop and a bookstore. But it was mine. The sign on the door read, "Reese Strategic Consulting." Zoe helped me move in furniture. A desk I'd found at an estate sale. 2 chairs from IKEA. A bookshelf that leaned slightly to the left. We hung motivational posters that we'd ironically bought as a joke, but that actually made the space feel less empty. "It's perfect," Zoe said, standing back to admire our work. "It's tiny," I corrected. "It's perfect," she insisted. "It's yours. That's what matters." She was right. For the first time in my career, I was building something that no one could take away from me. The first month was terrifying. I had savings and severance, but no clients. I spent my days cold calling former contacts, sending carefully crafted emails, attending networking events where I smiled until my face hurt. Most people were polite but non-committal. Some didn't respond at all. A few were brutally honest. "Emma, you're talented, but you don't have the infrastructure to handle our needs. Maybe in a year or 2. But I kept pushing. Because what else was I going to do? Go back to working for someone like Richard? Crawl to another company and spend years climbing another corporate ladder? No. I'd made my choice. Now I had to make it work. 6 weeks in, I got my first real lead. David Thornton, the CEO of Meridian Industries. The $12.5 million client I'd spent 3 years cultivating. He called me directly. "Emma, I heard you left Richard's firm." "Started my own," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Reese Strategic Consulting." "Interesting." There was a pause. "How would you feel about grabbing lunch? I have some concerns about our current arrangement, and I'd like to get your perspective." My heart raced. "I'd be happy to meet with you, David. When works for you?" We met 2 days later at Marcello's, an upscale Italian place downtown where the prices were absurd and the portions were tiny, but the clientele were exactly the kind of people I needed to be seen with. David ordered wine and got straight to the point. "Marcus Webb is in over his head." I sipped my water, careful to keep my expression neutral. "How so?" The quarterly strategy review he presented last week was underwhelming. It was mostly recycled ideas from previous presentations. Nothing new. Nothing innovative. David leaned forward. And when I pushed back, asked him to explain the reasoning behind some of his recommendations, he couldn't. He just kept saying, "This is how we've always done it." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I know Marcus learned from you, Emma. That was part of why I felt comfortable with the transition. But it's becoming clear that he learned what to do, not why to do it. Do you understand the difference?" "I do," I said carefully. "So here's my question." David set down his wine glass and looked at me directly. "If I wanted to bring in an outside consultant to work alongside our existing team, someone who could provide strategic oversight and fill in some of these gaps, would you be interested?" Everything I'd worked for. Everything I'd hoped for. It was sitting right there across the table from me. But I had to play this right. "David, I appreciate the offer. But you should know that if I come on as a consultant, it could create tension with Richard's firm. With Marcus specifically. And I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position." "Let me worry about managing Richard," David said. "I'm asking if you're interested." I looked him in the eye. "Very interested." "Good. I'll have my team send over a consulting agreement. I'm thinking a 6-month contract to start, with the possibility of extension if it works out. He paused. And Emma? I want you to know that I never bought the narrative that Marcus was responsible for winning our business. I've been doing this long enough to know who does the real work. Something warm spread through my chest. Validation. Finally. Thank you, David. That means a lot. We shook hands, and I left that restaurant feeling like I'd just won the lottery. The contract came through 3 days later. It was generous. More than generous. It was enough to keep my business afloat for 6 months while I built up other clients. I signed it immediately. When I showed up for my first day as a consultant at Meridian Industries, I wore my Navy power suit again. The one that made me feel invincible. The receptionist directed me to a conference room on the 3rd floor, where David was waiting with 3 members of his executive team. And Marcus. He looked shocked to see me. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. Emma, David said warmly, thank you for coming. Everyone, this is Emma Reese. She'll be working with us as a strategic consultant for the next 6 months. The executives introduced themselves, polite and professional. Marcus said nothing, just stared at me like I was a ghost. Marcus, as David said, since you've worked with Emma before, I'm sure you'll make sure she has everything she needs. Marcus managed a tight smile. Of course. The meeting lasted 2 hours. I listened more than I spoke, taking notes, asking clarifying questions, getting a sense of where the pain points were. And there were many. Marcus had tried to implement one of my old strategies, but he'd misunderstood a key component, and now the client retention numbers were starting to slip. He'd proposed a new acquisition campaign, but it was too aggressive, too expensive, and not targeted enough. I could see exactly where he'd gone wrong. Because I knew these strategies inside and out. I'd created them. And I knew all the nuances, all the adjustments needed for different contexts, all the pitfalls to avoid. Marcus had the playbook. But he didn't have the expertise. After the meeting, as everyone was filing out, Marcus grabbed my arm. We need to talk. I pulled away. Do we? You can't just swoop in here and undermine me. I'm the primary contact for this account. And I'm a consultant they hired because you're not delivering. I kept my voice low and calm. This isn't personal, Marcus. It's just business. Remember? His jaw clenched. Richard's not going to like this. Then maybe Richard should have hired someone competent to take my place. I smiled sweetly. Have a great rest of your day. I walked away, and for the first time since that awful meeting in Richard's conference room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Word traveled fast. Within 2 weeks, 3 other clients I'd worked with at Richard's firm reached out to me. They didn't say it explicitly, but the message was clear. They'd rather work with me independently than deal with Marcus as their primary contact. I took on 2 of them. Small projects at first, just to test the waters. But small projects turned into bigger ones. Bigger ones turned into retainers. Retainers turned into referrals. Within 3 months, I had to hire my first employee. Her name was Priya, a brilliant analyst who'd been laid off from a competitor and was hungry to prove herself. I remembered that hunger. I made sure to treat her the way I wished I'd been treated. Within 6 months, Reese Strategic Consulting had 7 clients and 3 employees. We'd outgrown the tiny office in Riverside and moved to a bigger space downtown, with an actual conference room and a kitchen and windows that didn't overlook a coffee shop. We were small, but we were growing. Fast. And then Richard called. I almost didn't answer. His name on my phone screen made my stomach twist. But curiosity won out. Emma, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Do you have time to meet this week? I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pen between my fingers. What kind of opportunity? I'd rather discuss it in person, if you don't mind. I mind, I said bluntly. If you want to pitch me something, Richard, you can do it over the phone. There was a long pause. Then, we're losing clients. Major clients. And they're all asking for you specifically. I smiled. And I'm hoping we can work out some kind of arrangement. Maybe you could come back as a senior partner. We could restructure the compensation, give you more autonomy. No, I interrupted. Emma, if you'd just listen, I said. No, Richard. I kept my voice pleasant but firm. I have my own firm now. My own clients. My own team. Why would I give that up to come back to a place that didn't value me? We made a mistake, Richard admitted. I can see that now. Marcus isn't, he's not working out the way we'd hoped. That's unfortunate, I said, without a trace of sympathy. Emma, please. At least meet with me. Let me make a proper offer. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Fine. Tomorrow at 2. Marcello's. And Richard? You're buying. The next day, I showed up 15 minutes late on purpose. Let him sit there and sweat. Richard was already at a table by the window, looking older than I remembered. Tired. The meeting with him was short. He made his offer. Senior partner. Equity stake. Nearly double my old salary. It was a good offer. A great offer, actually. And I turned it down without hesitation. Why? Richard asked, genuinely baffled. Emma, this is everything you worked for. Everything you wanted. No, I said quietly. This is everything I thought I wanted when I believed that loyalty and hard work would be rewarded. When I thought that doing the right thing mattered in this industry. I leaned forward. But you taught me differently, Richard. You taught me that the only person I can rely on is myself. So that's what I'm doing. Relying on myself. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe, I agreed. But it'll be my mistake. Not yours. I left him sitting there with the check and his failed offer, and I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt free. But the story wasn't over yet. Not even close. Because 2 days after I turned down Richard's offer, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Harrison Cole, the CEO of Titanium Corporation. One of the biggest players in our industry. The kind of client that could make or break a consulting firm. Ms. Reese, he said in a deep, authoritative voice. I've been hearing interesting things about your firm. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership. I'd be happy to meet with you, Mr. Cole. Excellent. My office. Tomorrow at 10. And Ms. Reese? Come prepared to think big. I showed up the next morning with a full pitch deck, 3 strategy proposals, and a portfolio of my recent work. Harrison's office was on the 45th floor of a glass tower downtown, with views that stretched all the way to the mountains. He was tall, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that filled a room. You came from Richard Chen's firm, he said, not bothering with small talk. I did. And now you're taking his clients. They're choosing to work with me, I corrected. There's a difference. Harrison smiled. There is indeed. Tell me, Emma, may I call you Emma? I nodded. Tell me why a major corporation like mine should trust a consulting firm that's less than a year old, run by one person with a handful of employees, when we could work with established firms that have decades of experience and hundreds of staff? It was a test. I knew it was a test. Because established firms will give you safe, predictable strategies that keep you competitive but never make you a leader, I said. They'll assign you a team of junior analysts who'll plug your data into the same models they use for everyone else. You'll get good results. Solid results. But you won't get breakthrough results. I pulled out my laptop and turned it toward him. This is a retention analysis I did for Meridian Industries. When they were working with Richard's firm, they were losing 12% of their clients annually. Industry standard is 10 to 15%, so everyone thought it was acceptable. I clicked to the next slide. In 6 months of working with me, we've dropped that to 4%. And we're on track to hit 2% by year's end. Harrison leaned forward, studying the graphs. How, he asked. By actually understanding what makes clients leave. Not just the surface reasons they give in exit surveys, but the underlying frustrations, the small failures that accumulate over time. I clicked through more slides. We implemented a predictive model that identifies at-risk clients 3 months before they start looking for alternatives. Then we intervene with targeted solutions before they ever think about leaving. Impressive, Harrison admitted. Mr. Cole, you don't need another established firm telling you what you already know. You need someone who's hungry enough to find the answers you haven't thought to look for. Someone who's small enough to be nimble but experienced enough to deliver results. I closed my laptop. That's what I'm offering. Harrison sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. If I bring you on, Richard Chen will not be happy. He's been trying to land our account for 3 years. I met his eyes steadily. Is that a problem? For him? Absolutely. Harrison's smile widened. For me? Not at all. I like competition. Keeps everyone sharp. He stood and extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Emma. My team will send over a contract this week. I shook his hand, professional and calm, even though inside I was screaming with joy. Titanium Corporation. I'd just landed Titanium Corporation. The contract was substantial. A 2-year commitment. 7 figures annually. The kind of client that would put my firm on the map. When I told Priya and the rest of my team, they actually cheered. We went out for celebratory drinks that night, toasting to growth and success and sticking it to the bastards who counted us out. But I knew what this meant. Richard would find out. Marcus would find out. And they would not be happy. Sure enough, the next morning I got an email from Richard. The subject line was just, seriously? I didn't open it. I deleted it and went back to work. What I didn't know was that behind the scenes, Marcus was panicking. I found out later, from a former colleague who still worked at Richard's firm, that Marcus had a complete meltdown when he heard about the Titanium Corp deal. He'd apparently stormed into Richard's office, demanding to know how I'd stolen another client, insisting that I must be using confidential information from my time at the firm. Richard, to his credit, had told Marcus to calm down and focus on keeping the clients they still had. But Marcus couldn't let it go. He'd built his entire career on taking credit for my work. And now that I wasn't there to prop him up, everyone could see he was mediocre at best. So he did what desperate people do. He made a stupid mistake. 3 weeks after I signed the Titanium Corp contract, I received a cease and desist letter from Richard's firm. It claimed I was using proprietary strategies and client information that belonged to them. It demanded that I stop working with any clients I'd had contact with during my employment there. And it threatened legal action if I didn't comply. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each word. Then I called my attorney. His name was Mitchell Graves, a sharp litigation specialist who'd helped me negotiate my exit package from Richard's firm. They don't have a case, Mitchell said after reviewing the letter. You signed a standard non-compete, but it was poorly written. It restricts you from working for direct competitors, but you're not working for a competitor. You own your own firm. And the strategies they're claiming are proprietary? Those were developed by you. You have documentation proving it. This is intimidation, Emma. Nothing more. So what do we do? I asked. We call their bluff, Mitchell said. I'll draft a response. But Emma? This is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the past year. The betrayal. The humiliation. The long nights building my business from nothing. The satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Yeah, I said. I'm prepared. Mitchell's response was beautiful. Professional but firm. It laid out exactly why Richard's claims were baseless, included documentation showing my ownership of the strategies in question, and pointed out that their cease and desist could be construed as tortious interference with my business relationships. And then Mitchell added a paragraph that made me smile. Furthermore, should your client persist in these frivolous claims, we will have no choice but to pursue counterclaims for defamation and business interference. We are confident that discovery would reveal interesting patterns of misconduct at your firm, including potential misappropriation of Ms. Reese's work product during her employment. It was a warning shot. Back off or we'll come after you. A week passed. Then 2. No response from Richard's firm. I thought maybe they'd dropped it. Realized they were wrong and moved on. I should have known better. Because Marcus, desperate and drowning, decided to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to David Thornton directly. I don't know exactly what he said in that conversation, but David called me immediately afterward, and he was furious. Emma, I just got off the phone with Marcus Webb. He told me that you've been feeding me false information about his work. That you've been deliberately sabotaging his strategies to make yourself look better. My stomach dropped. David, I know it's not true, David interrupted. I've worked with you long enough to know your character. But I wanted to give you a heads up that he's spreading this narrative. And I'm not the only person he's calling. My hands were shaking. Who else? I don't know. But Emma? You need to get ahead of this. If he's making these accusations to multiple clients, it could damage your reputation. I thanked David and hung up. Then I sat at my desk, trying to control the rage that was threatening to consume me. Marcus was trying to destroy my business. My reputation. Everything I'd built. All because he couldn't handle the fact that he was failing without me. I called Mitchell again. We have a new problem. After I explained the situation, Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. If Marcus is making false statements about you to your clients, that's defamation. We could sue. But litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and unpredictable. Even if we win, it could take years and cost you clients in the meantime. So what do I do? You have 2 options. Option 1, ignore it. Don't engage. Let your work speak for itself. Eventually, people will see through Marcus's lies. And option 2? Option 2 is riskier. But potentially more effective. Mitchell paused. You go on offense. You document every false statement Marcus makes. You gather testimonials from clients who know the truth. You build an ironclad case showing that Marcus has been taking credit for your work since day 1. And then you hold a press conference or release a statement that exposes everything. That feels vindictive, I said slowly. It is vindictive, Mitchell agreed. But sometimes, Emma, the only way to stop a bully is to hit back harder than they hit you. I thought about it for the rest of the day. I thought about it through a sleepless night. I thought about it through breakfast the next morning. And then I made my decision. I chose option 3. One Mitchell hadn't mentioned. One I came up with on my own. I was going to let Marcus destroy himself. Because here's the thing I'd learned in my years as a strategist, the best way to beat an opponent isn't to attack them directly. It's to create conditions where they defeat themselves. Marcus was already panicking. Already making mistakes. Already burning bridges with his desperate accusations. All I had to do was stay calm, stay professional, and keep delivering excellent work. So that's what I did. When clients called to ask about Marcus's accusations, I didn't defend myself aggressively. I just said, calmly and confidently, "I'm sorry Marcus is struggling. I know how hard this industry can be. But I'm confident that my work speaks for itself, and I'm happy to provide references from any of my clients if you'd like to verify my results." When colleagues from my old firm reached out to gossip about the drama, I didn't engage. I just said, "I wish Richard and Marcus the best. I'm focused on my own business now." When Zoe asked if I wanted to accidentally leak some of the documentation showing Marcus's incompetence, I said no. "Why not?" she asked, frustrated. "Emma, he's trying to ruin you." "Because I don't need to," I said calmly. "Marcus is ruining himself just fine without my help. And when he finally crashes, I want everyone to know that I had nothing to do with it. That I took the high road." "The high road is overrated," Zoe muttered. But I stuck to my plan. I stayed professional. I stayed quiet. I stayed focused on my work. And I watched as Marcus slowly fell apart. It started with small things. Missed deadlines. Sloppy presentations. Clients complaining to Richard about the quality of Marcus's work. Then bigger things. A major strategy proposal that was rejected because Marcus had miscalculated the ROI by a factor of 3. A client meeting where Marcus apparently couldn't answer basic questions about his own recommendations. And then the final straw. I heard about it from David Thornton, who heard it from a colleague at another firm. Marcus had plagiarized a presentation. He'd taken a case study from a public business journal, changed some of the names and numbers, and presented it as original work for a pitch to a potential new client. Someone on the client's team had recognized it, and they'd called Marcus out in the middle of the presentation. The potential client had walked out. And they'd complained to Richard directly. 2 days later, Marcus was fired. I found out from a brief, almost apologetic email from Richard, "I thought you should know that Marcus Webb is no longer with the firm. I'm sure you can imagine why. I hope we can move past all of this, Emma. For what it's worth, you were right. About everything." I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat in my office, in the silence, processing what I felt. I'd expected to feel triumphant. Vindicated. Victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. And a little bit sad. Because Marcus had been talented once. Raw and unpolished, but talented. If he'd focused on developing his own skills instead of stealing credit for mine, he could have built a real career. But he'd taken shortcuts. And shortcuts had consequences. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Emma?" It was Marcus. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted to be successful so badly, and you made it look so easy, and I thought if I could just..." He trailed off. I could have said a lot of things. I could have torn into him. Could have told him exactly how much he'd hurt me, how much damage he'd caused. But I didn't. "Marcus," I said quietly. "I hope you figure things out. I really do. But I can't help you anymore. You need to do that on your own." "I know," he said. "I know. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. That I see now what I did. And I'm sorry." "I appreciate that," I said. And I meant it. "Goodbye, Marcus." I hung up. And that was the last time I ever spoke to him. 3 months later, Reese Strategic Consulting had 12 clients, 8 employees, and had just signed a lease on a full floor in a premium office building downtown. We had a real reception area, a real conference room, and offices for everyone. I stood in the middle of the empty space before we moved in, taking it all in. "Not bad for 9 months of work," Zoe said, coming to stand beside me. "Not bad at all," I agreed. "Are you happy?" she asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. A year ago, I'd thought happiness meant climbing the corporate ladder. Getting promoted. Being recognized by people like Richard. Having a title that impressed people at parties. Now I knew differently. Happiness wasn't about titles or validation from people who didn't value you. It was about building something you believed in. Working with people you respected. Knowing that your success was yours and no one could take it away. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I am." The official opening of our new office was on a Friday in November. We threw a small party, invited our clients and some industry colleagues. Priya had organized everything, from the catering to the decorations to the bartender mixing craft cocktails in the corner. David Thornton showed up with a bottle of expensive champagne. Harrison Cole sent a huge flower arrangement with a card that read, "To many more years of breaking the rules and getting results." Even Mitchell Graves stopped by, joking that he was disappointed we'd handled everything so smoothly that he didn't get to take anyone to court. I was standing by the windows, looking out at the city lights, when I saw him. Richard Chen. Standing in the lobby area, looking uncertain. Like he wasn't sure if he should come in. Priya appeared at my elbow. "Want me to have him removed?" I smiled at that. "No. Let him in." Richard made his way through the crowd toward me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. "Emma," he said. "Your assistant said I could come up. I hope that's all right." "It's fine, Richard. What can I do for you?" He glanced around the office, taking in the sleek furniture, the happy employees, the successful clients mingling with champagne. "I wanted to see for myself. Everyone's talking about what you've built here. How fast you've grown." "We've been fortunate," I said neutrally. "No," Richard said. "You've been brilliant. And I was an idiot for not seeing it when you worked for me." He paused. "I'm not here to make another offer. I know you're not coming back. I just wanted to say congratulations. You earned this." It was the first genuine thing I'd ever heard Richard say. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." "Does it?" Richard looked at me with something like regret. "Because I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Emma. What I did, promoting Marcus over you, taking credit for your work. I know I can't undo that." "No," I agreed. "You can't. But you can learn from it. You can treat your next star employee better than you treated me." Richard nodded slowly. "I'm trying. I hired a new senior director. Woman named Patricia Reynolds. 15 years of experience. I'm actually listening to her ideas. Actually giving her credit for her work." "Good," I said. "That's good, Richard." We stood there for a moment in awkward silence. Then Richard extended his hand. "Good luck, Emma." "I mean that." I shook his hand. "Good luck to you too." He left, and I went back to my party, to my team, to my celebration. And I realized something important. I'd spent so much energy being angry at Richard and Marcus. So much time wanting them to fail, to suffer, to understand what they'd done to me. But now that I had my own success, now that I'd built something real and valuable in mine, their failures didn't matter anymore. Their suffering didn't bring me joy. Their understanding didn't validate me. I'd already validated myself. By surviving. By thriving. By proving that I didn't need them to succeed. That was the real revenge. Not their downfall. My rise. The party wound down around midnight. Priya and I were the last ones in the office, cleaning up champagne glasses and discarded cocktail napkins. You know what I think? Priya said, tossing empty bottles into a recycling bag. What's that? I think you're going to build an empire. I think in 5 years, 10 years, Reese Strategic Consulting is going to be the firm everyone wants to work with. The firm that everyone talks about. I smiled. That's ambitious. You taught me to be ambitious, Priya said. You taught me that you don't have to play by someone else's rules to win. You just have to be smart enough to write your own. And standing there in my office, in the company I'd built from nothing, with an employee who believed in me the way I'd once believed in Marcus, I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe this was just the beginning. 1 year after I walked out of Richard's conference room, I received an email from a journalist at Business Insider. She was writing a feature on women who'd successfully launched consulting firms after leaving toxic corporate environments. She wanted to interview me. I said yes. The article came out 3 weeks later. It was titled, How Emma Reese Turned Betrayal into a Business Empire. It detailed my story, how I'd trained my replacement without knowing it, how I'd been pushed out of my own position, how I'd negotiated my exit and started my own firm. But it also talked about my philosophy. How I built my business on transparency and respect. How I made sure my employees got credit for their work. How I turned down clients who wanted shortcuts instead of real strategies. The article quoted David Thornton, Emma Reese is the kind of consultant every CEO wishes they had. She doesn't tell you what you want to hear. She tells you what you need to know. And then she delivers results that exceed expectations. It quoted Harrison Cole, in an industry full of people who overpromise and underdeliver, Emma is refreshingly honest. If she says she can do something, she can. And usually, she does it better than she said she would. The article ended with a quote from me, people ask me if I regret how things ended at my old firm. The truth is, getting pushed out was the best thing that ever happened to my career. It forced me to bet on myself. And that's a bet I'll take every single time. The article went viral. Within 48 hours, I'd received over 100 LinkedIn connection requests. 37 inquiries from potential clients. 17 emails from other consultants who wanted advice on starting their own firms. And a dozen interview requests from other publications. My inbox was chaos. But it was good chaos. Priya hired an assistant just to handle the influx. We brought on 3 more consultants. We started turning down projects because we were at capacity. 6 months later, we had 20 employees. A year after that, 35. We expanded into new service offerings. Went from just client strategy to also offering organizational development, leadership training, and digital transformation consulting. We opened a second office in Austin. Then a third in Seattle. People started calling us the consulting firm to watch. The disruptor. The company that was changing how strategic consulting worked. And through it all, I never forgot where I came from. Never forgot what it felt like to be betrayed, undervalued, replaced. So I made sure that every person who worked for me knew they were valued. Made sure they got credit for their ideas. Made sure they had opportunities to grow. I became the mentor I'd wished I had. The boss I'd deserved. The leader I'd needed. And the crazy thing? It worked. Our retention rate was 97. In an industry where people job hopped constantly, my employees stayed. Because they knew they were appreciated. Because they knew they had a future. For years after I started Reese Strategic Consulting, we were approached by a major investment firm. They wanted to acquire us. Fold us into their portfolio of consulting companies. The offer was substantial. Life-changing money. Enough that I could retire at 40 and never work again. I met with them. Heard their pitch. Asked my questions. And then I said no. Why? The lead investor asked, genuinely confused. Ms. Reese, this is more money than most people see in a lifetime. You could do anything you want. I'm already doing what I want, I said simply. I built this company because I wanted to prove something. To myself. To the people who counted me out. And yeah, I've proven it. But now I keep doing it because I love it. Because I'm good at it. Because I have employees who depend on me and clients who trust me and a legacy I'm building. I stood up and shook his hand. But I appreciate the offer. Really. They raised the offer twice more over the next 6 months. Each time, I said no. Because some things aren't for sale. Some things matter more than money. I learned that the hard way. And I wasn't going to forget it now. But this story, this journey, it wasn't really about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. Everyone who'd ever been pushed aside for someone less qualified. Everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. I wanted them to know, you are enough. You're more than enough. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you'll ever do. That was my message. That was my mission. And I was going to spend the rest of my career proving it. 5 years after that awful Tuesday morning in Richard's conference room, I was invited to speak at a major industry conference. The keynote address, in front of 1,500 people. I stood backstage, listening to the moderator introduce me, and I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal. The anger. The fear. The determination. The late nights and early mornings and moments when I wanted to quit. And then the victories. The clients who believed in me. The employees who trusted me. The business that grew beyond my wildest expectations. Please welcome Emma Reese, founder and CEO of Reese Strategic Consulting. I walked onto that stage to thunderous applause. Stood at the podium and looked out at an audience of my peers, my competitors, my colleagues. And I told them my story. Not the sanitized version. Not the professional version. The real version. I told them about Marcus. About Richard. About the day I walked out with nothing and the months I spent building something from that nothing. I told them about the mistakes I made. The times I doubted myself. The moments I wanted to give up. But I also told them about the resilience I found. The strength I didn't know I had. The success that came from refusing to let other people define my worth. Someone asked me recently, I said, nearing the end of my speech, if I would change anything. If I could go back to that meeting and somehow keep my job, somehow stop Marcus from taking my position, would I? I paused, letting the question hang in the air. And the answer is no. I wouldn't change a single thing. Because that betrayal, that humiliation, that moment when I lost everything I thought I wanted? That was the moment I found out who I really was. That was the moment I stopped living according to someone else's definition of success and started building my own. I looked out at the audience, saw people nodding, saw some dabbing at their eyes. So if you're sitting here today and you've been betrayed, if someone has stolen your ideas or taken credit for your work or pushed you aside for someone less deserving, I want you to know something. This is not the end of your story. This is not your failure. This is your opportunity. Because the people who betray you are actually giving you the greatest gift imaginable. They're showing you that you don't need them. That you're capable of so much more than they ever gave you credit for. That you can build something better, something truer, something entirely your own. Don't waste your energy on revenge. Don't waste your time trying to prove them wrong. Just focus on proving yourself right. Build something so undeniably successful that no one can question your value ever again. Build something so authentic that no one can take it from you. That's what I did. And if I can do it, so can you. The applause when I finished was deafening. People stood. They cheered. Some rushed the stage afterward to shake my hand, to ask questions, to tell me their own stories of betrayal and comeback. I stayed for hours, talking to anyone who wanted to talk. Because I remembered what it felt like to be alone with your anger and your hurt and your determination. And if I could help even one person channel that into something productive, it was worth it. That night, back in my hotel room, I got a text from an unknown number. I saw your keynote online. It was incredible. You've built something amazing, Emma. I'm happy for you. And I'm sorry again for everything. Marcus, I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it without responding. Part of me wanted to write back something cutting, something that would make him feel as small as he'd made me feel. But mostly, I just felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No need to twist the knife. Marcus was part of my past. A painful part, but a part that had led to everything good in my present. So I wrote back, thank you. I hope you're doing well. And then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Because I had a business to run in the morning. Clients to serve. Employees to mentor. A legacy to build. And none of that had anything to do with Marcus or Richard or anyone else who doubted me. It only had to do with me. And the empire I'd built from betrayal. 6 months after that keynote, something unexpected happened. I was in my office, reviewing quarterly reports, when Priya knocked on my door. Emma? You have a visitor. She says it's urgent. I don't have any meetings scheduled, I said, checking my calendar. I know. But I think you'll want to see her. I followed Priya to the reception area, and there she was. Patricia Reynolds. The woman Richard had hired to replace Marcus. I recognized her from her LinkedIn profile. I'd looked her up when Richard mentioned her at my office opening party. She stood when she saw me, professional and poised. Ms. Reese. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Call me Emma. And no problem. How can I help you? I was hoping we could talk privately. I led her to my office, gestured for her to sit. She was probably in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I'm going to be direct, Patricia said once the door closed. I'm leaving Richard's firm. And I want to know if you're hiring. I blinked, surprised. You've only been there, what, 2 years? 2 years too long, Patricia said. Richard talked a good game when he hired me. Said he'd learned his lesson, that he valued his senior staff, that things were different now. And maybe he believed that. But the culture there is toxic, Emma. The partners take credit for their team's work. The compensation structure rewards backstabbing. And I'm tired of fighting against it. I leaned back in my chair. So why re-strategic? There are plenty of firms out there. Because I've been watching you, Patricia said simply. I've seen how fast you've grown. I've talked to people who work here, people who've worked with you as clients. And everyone says the same thing, you actually practice what you preach. You actually treat people well. She leaned forward. I don't just want a job, Emma. I want to be part of something that matters. Something that's changing how this industry works. And from what I can tell, that's what you're building. I studied her for a moment. Thought about the risk of hiring someone from Richard's firm. Thought about the message it would send. Then I thought about the message I wanted to send. That Re-Strategic was a place where talented people who were tired of toxic environments could rebuild their careers. Where doing good work and treating people well wasn't a weakness, it was the whole point. Okay, I said. Tell me about your experience. What you're looking for. What you'd bring to the team. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, I knew Patricia was exactly the kind of person I wanted at my firm. Experienced, ethical, hungry to prove herself in a better environment. I made her an offer that day. She accepted on the spot. When word got out that Patricia Reynolds had left Richard's firm for mine, my inbox exploded again. 3 more senior consultants from competitor firms reached out asking about opportunities. 2 of them had stories similar to mine, betrayed, undervalued, pushed aside. I hired both of them. Within 6 months, we'd grown from 35 employees to 57. We were turning down work because we couldn't keep up with demand. We were being profiled in business magazines and consulting journals. And Richard's firm? They were struggling. Losing clients. Losing employees. Losing relevance. I heard through the industry grapevine that Richard had tried to sell the firm, but couldn't find a buyer at the price he wanted. That he was considering early retirement. Part of me, a small, petty part, felt vindicated. But mostly, I just felt grateful. Grateful that I'd gotten out. Grateful that I'd built something better. Grateful that I could provide opportunities for people like Patricia who deserved them. 7 years after I walked out of that conference room, Reese Strategic Consulting was ranked as one of the top 15 consulting firms in the country. We had offices in 6 cities. Over 100 employees. Revenue in the tens of millions. But more than that, we had a reputation. For integrity. For innovation. For treating people well. I got calls from business schools asking me to speak to their students. From women's leadership organizations wanting me to mentor their members. From other entrepreneurs wanting to know how I'd built such a successful company so fast. And I told them the truth, I built it by refusing to become the thing that hurt me. I built it by turning pain into purpose. I built it by betting on myself when no one else would. That's the story. That's the journey. From betrayed employee to CEO. From walking out with nothing to building an empire. But you know what the craziest part is? The part no one tells you about in the success stories and the motivational speeches? The healing didn't happen when I signed my first big client. It didn't happen when we opened our second office. It didn't happen when I gave that keynote or when Patricia joined the team or when we hit 8 figures in revenue. The healing happened in small moments. In quiet moments. It happened when Priya came to me with an idea and I listened and we implemented it and it worked, and I made sure everyone knew it was her idea. It happened when a young analyst on my team made a mistake and came to me terrified, and I helped her fix it instead of humiliating her. It happened when I hired someone who reminded me of myself at 25, eager and talented and a little naive, and I got to mentor them the way I wished someone had mentored me. It happened when I realized that I'd gone an entire day without thinking about Marcus or Richard or that awful meeting. It happened when I looked around at what I'd built and felt proud instead of angry. That's when I knew I'd really won. Not when I succeeded. But when I stopped measuring my success by their failure. When their story stopped being part of my story. 8 years after everything fell apart, I was in my office late on a Friday night. Everyone else had gone home. The building was quiet. I was finishing up some paperwork before the weekend, and my phone rang. Unknown number again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Emma Reese speaking. Ms. Reese, this is Catherine Webb. Marcus Webb's sister. My heart stuttered. I hadn't heard Marcus's name in years. Is everything okay? Not really. Marcus asked me to call you. He's been diagnosed with cancer. Aggressive. Stage 4. He asked if you might be willing to visit him. Before. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I sat down hard in my chair. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I know you two didn't part on good terms, Catherine said. And I wouldn't blame you if you said no. But he's been asking for you. Says there are things he needs to say. Every logical part of my brain said no. Said I didn't owe Marcus anything. Said I'd moved on and he was part of a past I'd left behind. But there was another part. The part that remembered Marcus before everything went wrong. The eager analyst who'd stayed late to learn from me. Who'd asked good questions and written thoughtful notes. Who'd had potential before he let his ambition corrupt him. Okay, I heard myself say. Send me the address. I'll visit tomorrow. Marcus was at a hospice center in the suburbs. Clean and peaceful, with gardens and quiet hallways. Catherine met me in the lobby, looking exhausted and grateful. Thank you for coming, she said. He's in room 214. I'll give you some privacy. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding, not sure what I was going to say or feel or do. Marcus was in bed, looking nothing like the ambitious young man who'd taken my job. He'd lost weight. His skin was pale. But his eyes, when he saw me, were clear. Emma, he said, his voice rough. You came. I pulled a chair close to the bed. Your sister called. Said you wanted to see me. I didn't think you would. He tried to sit up, winced. After everything I did. Neither did I admitted. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus said, I've had a lot of time to think. Lying here. And I keep coming back to the same thing. I ruined the best opportunity one ever had. You were trying to help me, to teach me, to build me up. And I betrayed you. Yes, I said simply. You did. I told myself I was being strategic. Being smart. Playing the game. But I was just being cruel. His eyes were wet. And the worst part is, it didn't even work. I was terrible at that job. Everyone knew it. I knew it. But I was so desperate to prove I deserved it that I just made it worse. Marcus's please. Let me finish. He took a shaky breath. After Richard fired me, I couldn't get hired anywhere. My reputation was destroyed. I ended up working retail for 2 years. Retail, Emma. After everything I'd achieved, everything I'd destroyed, I was folding clothes at a department store. I didn't say anything. Just listened. Eventually I got another analyst position at a small firm. Entry level. Had to rebuild from scratch. And I did. Slowly. I learned to do the work myself instead of stealing credit. I learned to value my colleagues instead of seeing them as competition. I learned to be the person you tried to teach me to be. He looked at me directly. But by then it was too late. I'd lost you. Lost your mentorship. Lost your respect. Lost everything that mattered. Marcus, I said gently. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything, he said. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away. And I'm sorry. I've been sorry for years, but I was too ashamed to reach out again after that one phone call. Too afraid you'd tell me to go to hell. I looked at him, this dying man who'd once been my greatest student and my greatest betrayal, and I felt release. I forgive you, I said. Marcus's eyes widened. You do? Yeah. I do. Because holding on to that anger, that hurt, it doesn't serve me anymore. It hasn't for years. I leaned forward. What you did was wrong, Marcus. It was cruel and selfish and it hurt me deeply. But it also freed me. It forced me to build something I never would have built if I'd stayed comfortable in that job. So in a weird way, you did me a favor. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. Probably not, I agreed. But I'm not forgiving you for your benefit. I'm doing it for mine. Because I don't want to carry that weight anymore. We talked for another hour. About his life after everything fell apart. About the lessons he'd learned. About regrets and redemption and second chances that come too late. When I finally stood to leave, Marcus grabbed my hand weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. "For coming. For listening. For forgiving me when I don't deserve it." "You're welcome," I said. "And Marcus? I hope you find peace." He died 3 weeks later. Catherine sent me a message letting me know. Asked if I wanted to come to the funeral. I didn't go. Not out of spite or anger. Just because that chapter of my life was closed. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd made my peace. And now I could move forward completely unburdened. 10 years after I walked out of Richard's conference room, Reese Strategic Consulting celebrated a major milestone. We'd been named Consulting Firm of the Year by the National Business Association. The ceremony was in New York, black tie, all the major players in the industry in attendance. I stood on that stage, accepting the award, looking out at an audience that included clients I'd won, employees I'd mentored, competitors I'd outmaneuvered, and colleagues who doubted me. And Richard Chen. Sitting in the back, looking old and tired and somehow smaller than I remembered. Our eyes met for just a moment. He nodded once. A gesture of acknowledgement. Maybe respect. Maybe just acceptance of how things had turned out. I nodded back. Not in victory. Not in spite. Just in recognition that we'd both survived, we'd both moved forward, and the past was finally, truly behind us. In my acceptance speech, I didn't talk about betrayal or revenge or proving people wrong. I talked about building something meaningful. About treating people well. About success that comes from integrity instead of shortcuts. 10 years ago, I said, I lost a job I thought defined me. And I was devastated. I was angry. I was scared. But losing that job forced me to ask a question I'd never asked before: what do I actually want to build? Not what does someone else want me to build? Not what will make me look successful to other people. What do I want? I paused, looking out at the audience. And the answer surprised me. I wanted to build a place where talented people could do great work without sacrificing their integrity. Where success came from collaboration instead of competition. Where people were valued for their contributions instead of their ability to take credit. That's what Reese Strategic is. And that's why this award means so much. Because it's not just recognition of our business success. It's validation that you can build something ethical and still win. You can treat people well and still grow. You can lead with compassion and still compete. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, at the reception, person after person came up to congratulate me. To take photos. To ask about job opportunities. To tell me their own stories of betrayal and comeback. I stayed until midnight, talking to everyone, present for every conversation. Because I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. To be overlooked. To be undervalued. And I never wanted anyone in my orbit to feel that way. Near the end of the night, a young woman approached me hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 25. Nervous. Eager. "Ms. Reese? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sure you're tired. But I just wanted to say, your story saved my career." "How so?" I asked. I was working at a firm where my boss was taking credit for all my work. All of it. I designed a campaign that won a major award, and he accepted it without mentioning me. I was so angry, but I was also scared. I thought if I spoke up, I'd be blacklisted. That I'd never work in this industry again. She took a breath. "But then I read that Business Insider article about you. About how you walked away and built something better. And I thought, if Emma Reese can do it, maybe I can too." "What happened?" I asked softly. "I quit. Started freelancing. It was terrifying at first. But I just signed my first major contract. And it's with a client who values me, who gives me credit, who treats me like a partner instead of a resource to exploit. Her eyes were bright. So thank you for showing me it was possible. I pulled a business card from my purse and handed it to her. Email me next week. Tell me about your business. Maybe we can collaborate on something. Or at minimum, I can introduce you to some people who might need your services. Her hands shook as she took the card. Really? You'd do that? Really, I said. That's what this is all about. Lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. After she left, I stood there by the windows, looking out at the New York skyline, thinking about the journey that had led here. The betrayal that broke me. The anger that fueled me. The determination that rebuilt me. The success that freed me. And I realized something profound. I'd spent years thinking that my success was despite what Marcus and Richard did to me. But the truth was more complicated than that. My success was because of what they did to me. Because being pushed out forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. Because losing everything showed me what really mattered. Because betrayal taught me how to build something that couldn't be taken away. I wouldn't thank them. That would be too much. But I could acknowledge it. The gift wrapped in trauma. The opportunity disguised as loss. And I could make sure that I used that knowledge to be better. To mentor better. To lead better. To build better. That was the real revenge. Not their failure. My transformation. Not proving them wrong. Proving myself right. Not destroying what they built. Creating something so much greater that their betrayal became irrelevant. I left the reception that night with my award, my team, my success, and my peace of mind. And I drove home thinking about what I'd build next. What challenges I'd take on. What barriers I'd break. What legacy I'd leave. Because that's the thing about surviving betrayal and coming out stronger. Once you know you can do it once, you know you can do it again. You're not afraid of risks anymore. You're not afraid of failure. You're not afraid of people trying to tear you down. You've already survived the worst. Everything else is just another chapter in a story you're writing yourself. A story no one else can edit or erase or take credit for. A story that's entirely, completely, undeniably yours. And that's the most satisfying revenge of all. Living well. Building well. Succeeding well. On your own terms. By your own rules. In your own way. Until the people who betrayed you are just footnotes in a success story they can't help but read. Until their names are barely remembered and yours is impossible to forget. That's what I built from betrayal. That's what I created from pain. That's what I transformed from the worst day of my professional life. An empire. A legacy. A lesson. And if I could do it, starting from nothing in a tiny office that smelled like the coffee shop downstairs, then anyone can. Anyone brave enough to walk away from what's killing them. Anyone strong enough to bet on themselves. Anyone stubborn enough to turn devastation into determination. That's my message. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm living proof that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing everything you thought you wanted. Because only then are you free to build everything you actually need.